Okay, good morning. Oh, actually, this evening for me. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Big Data for Engineering. So this is the first tutorial on AWS, which will happen in week 10 for us. So in today's tutorial, I will just introduce very briefly on AWS Educate account, and then we will try to deploy a machine learning pipeline on AWS Fargate based on this tutorial from PyCorrect here. So just very quick introduction. PyCorrect is just a machine learning module in Python, and they tend to be lightweight and suitable for deployment. It's not the best out there, but it's super easy to deploy the pipeline. That's why I picked this tutorial as our first tutorial. We will move on to more complicated one later. So what is this pipeline? This one will just deploy one container, one Docker container on Amazon Elastic Container Service, ECS here, and then we will use AWS Fargate, which is just a serverless computing server for the ECS, and EKS, which is the Amazon Kubernetes service as well. So once we push this Docker image, it will run a Flask. If anyone haven't know about Flask, I would recommend you to study it because I'm a fan of Flask for modern deployment and get the model endpoint for model prediction and evaluation. And we probably use Flask in our final project tentatively. So this one will deploy a Flask front end, which is just a website that allows user to input some basic information such as age, sex, and some other basic information, and then get the prediction of their insurance bill. You should not worry about that prediction model. We're not here to talk about prediction model. That's data science and machine learning course. We're more interested into building the data pipeline here. Okay, so that's a quick introduction about the problem and what we are doing today. Now moving on to introduce about AWS Educate account. So once you got everything setup, which means you already sign up and then you accept the to invite to the classroom, then you should be able to see the two classroom. When you click on the classroom up here, you will have a different interface than me because I have the educator account, but you particularly will have the big data for engineering and introduction to programming. Please use the introduction to programming for all of the tutorial that we are doing now, and then use the big data one for your project. It's easier for me to manage your account like this. In case you running out of credit, which I highly doubt that, unless you use your AWS to build some side project with a lot of service altogether and leave that running for the whole semester, then you run out of credit. Then I can try to invite you to this one, which eventually give you a $50 more. But that's the last resource. Other thing that you can do is that you can have the AWS starter account in here, which allow you to $100 credit. Different than mine, I have got $150 credit. So this one will last you for the whole year, starting from the point that you sign up. So if you sign up and then you want to keep this account and then study later, feel free to do so. Okay, going back to the classroom so that we can start today tutorial. You probably has a different version than me, but let me just try to see. If I click on here, then it will redirect me to the Vocarium. I will have the admin dashboard where I can view basically all of your activity and all of your resources, which means how much money you have spent and have left. Okay, but for me, if I go into the workspace here, so this when my session start. So a standard session in AWS Educate account is only 2 hours and yeah, that's a weird number here. It should not be 2 hours and 60 minutes. It should be 3 hours, but that's what they did here. Okay, after this time for now, basically you got logged out but you can just refresh it and then the session will automatically start again. So you don't need to worry too much about this time. Just one thing that is a little bit annoying with AWS Educate account, which means because the refresh session like that, you need to get a new account detail every single new session, which means you go inside the AWS account detail in here in this workspace space, and then you need to get the new AWS access key and secret access key together with the session token to put into the AWS credential so that you can use the AWS control line interface here. This is different than the normal AWS account because if you use the normal AWS account, then you can create the new IAM service user account, and then you got the new access key and secret key every single time. But we cannot do that with this account. This is the way that we can use the AWS control line interface to push our Docker onto AWS. I will show you where the IAM is different from the normal account later. Okay, since now we know that we need the AWS control line interface, we need to download and install it. So just Google that. I'm not going to do the Google for you, but basically you need to find the AWS control line interface version 2. Please download the version 2. If you already have the version 1, based on AWS recommendation, you need to reinstall version 1 and then install version 2 again. Find the installer that works for your laptop. Either you use a Windows machine or Linux or Mac OS. Okay, I'm going to click the install here. Just keeping everything with the default setting. I might want to speed up the video at some times, but this will be weird. Anyway, let's finish this. So I already download the GitHub repo on PyCard deployment. Just going to quickly test the AWS, see if it's here or not. Okay, it's already here. That's good. One thing that we should always remember to do is trying to open the Docker desktop. Just leave it running for now. Don't need to worry about it. Now let's go back to here. So from this, let's go to the AWS console. Leave this one open. I will tell you more about this later. Okay, so this is the AWS console. When you get in here, everything is pretty much similar to the AWS normal account, which means you can try to access all the service in here. I did include a PDF of the services that included in the Educate account. There's only a couple of limitations, particularly to the IAM I mentioned before. So let's just try to get to that, and I will show you what is the problem that we might encounter. If there are any service that you cannot use, once you hit that, there will be a pop-up message and say you cannot access this service. So that's you know. But yeah, I haven't fully tested it out, but I try quite a few number of service, and it's quite decent number of service that we need for this course. So for example, if I'm going to create a new user here, Just say this is a test one, and then just give something random here. Then I can create a group of user as well, give it admin. So here say that the user is created but with error, which means we don't have the key and the access credential to log in here using this directly. Here we cannot create the access key and the login profile. That's why we only had to rely on this account detail here for us to access it from the AWS control line interface. It's a little bit annoying, but it still works for this course. Again, if you want to use your own AWS account, feel free to do so. I'm not going to stop you from that. Okay, going back to here, we already have the rebel ready. Now let's try to create a rebel on the Elastic container registry on AWS. So we got Elastic container registry. Yep, that's the one here. Get started. Okay, let's give it a name. You can keep it private because we're not actually sharing this to anyone. So just create a new rebel and maybe just call it something. Um, what should we call it? Let's call it pilot, pilot deployment. AWS. Keep everything as default and just create the rebel here. Okay, now we need to view the push command. So this basically allows us to push the container onto the AWS container registry here. We will do it one by one, but first we need to set up the AWS in here. So to set up the AWS, what we need to do is that we need to first initialize the things that we can put in the this one here. Okay, sometimes I lost my words. Yeah, the key here. So we need to call AWS configure to initialize that one. So access key, just put this one here. Then secret key, default region name. These things you can find the information up here. So if you are North Virginia, your US is one. I think by default you get US it is one, but if you got different region, try to use that region. So US is one. Default output format will be JSON. Okay, so this is just the basic setup if you have the normal IAM, but since we got the session key here with the AWS Educate account, you either have to go into the, the path here if you're on Mac OS. For Windows, that will be on C user, my user here, and .aws, and then credential, and then just edit it, and then put this whole thing in here. to make sure you got the correct section. Okay, click save, and that should be it. Okay, now let's view the push command again. So first thing first, we need to log in with AWS. So this command here will just get the login passwords and then log into AWS using those username and password like this one. So I'm just going to copy this and put this here. Okay, it says login succeeded. Next one, I'm going to build a Docker image using this command. You have to be in the folder where you download the repo from GitHub. Just make sure of that. So the Docker build very similar. I built this Docker before, that's why it's going to be super fast. But if you haven't built it, it's going to take a while. But yeah, I built this once before. Okay, next one after the build, then we can try to put a tag to it so that we can push the image directly to the repo on AWS. And last one, we'll just push it. Okay, look like this finished. Let's move on to the next step. I know it's taken quite a long while. Now let's check whether we got the image uploaded in here. Okay, so now you already got the Docker image with the tag latest on the ECS here, which is just the Amazon Container Service. Now we need to copy the UI. We're going to need it later. So just copy it, put it somewhere so that you can use it later. Now let's create a cluster for our Docker to run on. So I'm going to the cluster here, then just create cluster, pick networking only. Next step, give it a name, just call it demo. And then I'm going to add the CloudWatch because I want to get some insight related to how this is running. Okay, so that's it. So just explain a little bit. CloudWatch is actually the monitoring layer out of all the big data layer that I mentioned in the first week. Okay, just click View Roster to see it's active and running. Now we need a task definition. So task definition is required to run this on the Amazon ECS. Just create task definition. We're going to pick Fargate. And next step, just give it a name. I just call it the app here. And then we don't need to set this. This ECS task execution role by default. Just pick the lowest option on task memory and CPU. We don't need much for this task because it's a fairly simple prediction model, very lightweight. And then we click on container, just container name, the name that we had before. We can just name it a new, for example, container demo here. And then we're going to put in the UI before. Keep everything is the same, but we're going to export the 5000 port. So the 5000 port is the default port by Flask. And we're going to run Flask. That's why we're exposing this port to the front end. Okay, keep everything the same. You don't need to worry too much about this for now. But if you want to play around with all of these settings, feel free to do so. Okay, just edit. Don't worry about this app mesh because this is just a limitation. We're not authorized to use that, and we're not going to use that anyway. Okay, so that's it. Just click create a task. That's done. Let's view task definition. Okay, next we're going to try to run the task here. So we pick Fargate because we create the task definition in Fargate. Okay, everything is by default. Cluster VPC, select this one and select this one. Either one would be fine. You don't need to worry about whether it's US is 1A or 1B. And then everything is done. Let's just click on task here. Okay, so it's up and running. However, we need to allow external, let's say external computer to access this one. That's why we need to allow in-pub on the port 5000. So we go into find the network setting to include that. So the way we do it is click on the task here, which printed inside this one. Then we go with the ENI ID here. That's allow us to configure the network for this thing here. So network interface. Now we got the app. Let's go into the security hub for the app here. And we're going to edit the inbound hosts and add a custom host that go into export the port 5000. And we are going to allow everything. Just save it. Okay, so now it should be up and running. Just going back to here, you will see the public IP address of our app. Going in there, and the port will be 5000. Okay, I see the container status here is still pending. Probably take a while for it to be up. Okay, now it's running. Okay, that's good. Play around with it. For example, 47 female, just some number here. Region, let's say like that. Yeah, so don't worry about the model. It's really stupid model, but it's going to just demo you guys. Okay, this is the front end. There's a Flash app, and then you can use the model prediction like this one. Okay, I will put in a couple more just so that we can see the log on CloudWatch. That's the last thing that I want to show you guys. Okay, that's it. Okay, now let's go to CloudWatch. So we can go to CloudWatch from one of these. But let me open a new tab because I want to keep all of those later. So moving on to CloudWatch. Okay, still say that no data available yet. Probably is a little bit too early for CloudWatch. Yeah, I only see one dot here. The level of activity is not that much yet. Okay, just play a couple more times so that it create more activity. Okay, let's refresh CloudWatch. See if we got more coming in here. Let's just do 1 second sum. That's a little bit easier for us to see. Okay, so that's just a quick demonstration of how you can deploy a containerized app. Particularly here is a Flask app that going to as well a model deployment endpoint for a machine learning model. Now let's go into clean this up and need to turn off this task here because we don't want it to run all the time. We don't need to keep this running. Let's just click stop. And then we can delete the cluster as well. So just delete me. And then there's a CloudWatch that's still monitoring. That's why we need to delete the whole cluster here. However, I will still keep the rebel on the easier. So this saves you some time. Thank you for joining this tutorial session where I talk to myself alone. Um, if you have any trouble putting this up, if you're stuck at some stage, feel free to ask me during the real tutorial sessions. Thanks, guys.